Hi, I'm Nick with Dorman Products, and I'm here today to talk to you about fuel tanks. Whether you just started working the parts counter or you've been selling parts forever, the fuel tank is a pretty easy to understand part. It's the container that holds the gasoline or diesel that a vehicle burns for power. Selling them, though, requires an understanding of how they're replaced and how they fail so you can recommend the right products to your customer. Normally, fuel tanks are pretty long-lived items. Early tanks were made of steel, and that does continue in some vehicles today. Steel tanks are obviously susceptible to rust both inside and out, which is a key failure point for that type of tank. Other tanks are made of plastic. Plastic tanks can degrade as the polymers break down due to exposure of fuel, UV light, ozone, and temperature extremes. It's also important to remember that modern tanks also function under a bit of pressure too. That's what causes that hiss you sometimes hear when removing your fuel cap. There are also some failure modes common to both types of tanks. The first is when it's been noticeably damaged. Sometimes that damage can be from impact with an item in the roadway or a hole causing the tank to lose fuel from either age or intentional puncture by a fuel thief. The second situation for swapping a gas tank is having the tank out for another repair and finding damage. The fuel tank is generally considered to be one of the more difficult items to remove from a vehicle as it's unwieldy and rather heavy if filled with fuel. The top side of a fuel tank is very difficult to clean, even with diligent undercar washing, so finding rust and plastic damage on the tops when removed for another repair is not an uncommon occurrence. Sometimes tanks are replaced because they have a high concentration of sediment in the tank, be it rust, scale, or something else. When replacing a fuel tank, you'll obviously sell the tank itself, and a Dorman tank is the one to sell. We have deep coverage for cars and light trucks, and testing has shown that our tanks are more robust than some of the other ones out there. Our tanks are both galvanized and then E-coated for double the protection. A Dorman tank is highly likely to be the last one your customer's vehicle will ever need. There are also ancillary items you may want to suggest as well, like the fuel pump. The fuel pump is the heart of the system. Even if the tank is the item being replaced and the pump is functional, suggesting a fresh pump can be a good idea if the vehicle does not have a fuel pump access door due to the labor to install it. A fuel pump tank locking ring may also be a good item to suggest, irrespective of whether the pump is being replaced. They can rust in place on steel tanks, and they can also sort of rust in place on plastic tanks too. They lock into place and the plastic gets brittle and breaks when removal is attempted. The rings often get locked in place very firmly, and removal often mangles them, rendering them unusable. Similarly, most tanks are held in place with a few fuel tank straps that can suffer from corrosion. Dorman sells those too, so you can sell all the pieces to get the fuel system back up and running for your customers. There are other neglected pieces in the vicinity too. One of those pieces is the filler neck. Metal necks often corrode just like all these other pieces under the car, and rubber filler hoses can dry and crack from years of fuel exposure. We also sell complete filler neck assemblies. The final piece of the puzzle may be the skid plate, often seen on trucks or off-road vehicles to protect the tank from being damaged from large items the vehicle may be traveling over. Rust kills these things too, so those of you here in the Salt Belt will get to know these parts very well. If needed, we also sell direct fit fuel lines and fittings to help splice in the repairs that we cover in other videos. Be sure to check them out to understand the other parts of the fuel system where you can sell Dorman products. Your pro customers will understand this job well, but DIYers may need reminders of a few important things. The first is that the job should be done in an empty tank when possible. It's lighter and easier to move. The second thing is to make sure that they know that without a lift, it can be a bit of a wrestling match, fighting fuel and rust flakes coming down your eyes while laying in the driveway. As a final note, it's also a great time to sell a fuel filter, just in case there's any debris in the system, and that goes doubly if the pump is the reason for dropping the tank in the first place. And remember, if you need any help before, during, or after the sale, our Dorman technical support team is standing by to help. You can call them at 1-866-933-2911. Thanks for taking a little time to brush up on gas tanks. We hope this helps you and your customers. I'll see you soon.